This event is for veterans only, sir. Could an old watch unlock a hero's past? I need you to step back, said the young security guard, frowning as he crossed his arms. The dry desert wind kicked up dust at the entrance of Kirtland Air Force Base on the day of the scheduled ceremony. An elderly man hunched over and wearing a buttoned-up dress shirt, quietly reached out his hand, holding an old watch. People watched in silence as he slowly turned back, his eyes locked on the watch, a sad expression on his face, until the officer in charge of the event heard a name he never thought he'd hear again. Who was this man? And whose watch was he holding, this object that seemed to carry so much meaning? On a dirt road just outside Albuquerque, there's a small, isolated cabin, modest in size with chipped wooden window frames and a crooked chimney that rarely lets out smoke. Inside, time moves slowly. At exactly 6:15 a.m., like every day, the ticking of dozens of old clocks echoes softly through the walls. Wristwatches, wall clocks, pocket watches, all meticulously maintained with near-sacred precision by 82-year-old Robert Monroe. He sits at the table, a magnifying lens clipped to his glasses, holding a gear no bigger than a coin. His hands tremble slightly, but his focus is absolute. Metallic scent of vintage parts blends with the smell of boiling black coffee. Robert's skin is worn by time. His hair thin and combed back, his eyes sometimes distant, sometimes sharply alert. He wears a white cotton shirt, suspenders, and faded dress pants. He lives alone, no phone, no internet. He gets letters once in a while, but rarely replies. The neighbors simply know him as the old man with the clocks. Outside, a stray dog usually sleeps on the porch. Robert always leaves a bowl of water and another with scraps of bread and meat. He stays by the dog's side for a few seconds, watching quietly as it approaches and eats. His routine is simple. Rise with the sun, repair clocks until noon, eat lunch, and then walk down to the rusty mailbox at the edge of the road. It's usually empty, but today it holds a white envelope with the seal of the United States Air Force. He opens it slowly, shows no surprise, just reads the invitation. Air Show and Veterans Honor Ceremony, Kirtland Air Force Base, 11 a.m. Robert folds the paper, walks into his bedroom, and opens a small wooden box. Inside is an old wristwatch with a worn leather strap, aged and scuffed, yet still ticking perfectly. He wipes it down with a soft cloth carefully, then turns it over on the back. Barely legible engraving reads McClary Dang 1971. He takes a deep breath, closes the box, puts on his best shirt buttoned all the way to the top, dampens his hair, slips on his polished shoes, the same pair he always wears, and steps outside. The sky is clear. The dry air carries the scent of dust and gasoline, typical of the region. He walks slowly to the bus stop, gripping the box firmly. The driver greets him with a nod. Robert responds with a faint smile. On the way to the base, the bus rolls past the same arid fields, the same worn-out billboards with military slogans, and young recruits in uniform walking while glued to their phones. No one notices him. The bus drops him off about 100 meters from the gate. He steps down carefully, looks at the long line of cars entering through the checkpoint, and begins to walk. As he nears the main entrance, the atmosphere grows livelier. Children run around waving tiny flags. Restored aircrafts are on display. Men in blue and green uniforms walk between tents. There's music, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy, and announcements echoing over the loudspeakers, but Robert walks straight ahead toward the first security checkpoint, where a young guard stands with an impatient look. The guard glances at him, then at the crowd behind and frowns. Robert doesn't notice, or maybe he pretends not to. He takes one more step forward just as the guard crosses his arms. The ceremony hasn't started yet, but something is about to happen. Something that will forever change the meaning of that day. The security tent at Kirtland Air Force Base was bustling with activity. Visitors formed a steady line, many accompanied by family members or wearing t-shirts bearing the Air Force emblem. Robert Monroe walked with slow, deliberate steps. The heat was starting to press in. His hands held the watch firmly against his chest. The sun hit his wrinkled face, making him squint. When he reached the gate, a young security guard in his early 20s raised a firm hand. "Good morning, sir. May I see your ID, please?" Robert stopped, pulled the folded paper from his pocket, and handed it over. The guard skimmed it quickly, then looked Robert up and down, his brow furrowed. He returned the invitation with a reserved gesture. "Mr. Monroe, is that right? Let me ask you something. Do you have any kind of veteran ID, military identification card, any badge or credentials?" Robert shook his head calmly. "No, I don't have those anymore. I just came to leave something at the memorial. I wanted to deliver it in person." The guard crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. "This event is for veterans only, sir. I need you to step away." Robert hesitated. He looked to the side, trying to spot someone who might help, but no one was paying attention. A few people in line had started to notice the exchange. "Isn't the event open to the public?" he asked. "Yes, sir. But only those identified as veterans and their families are allowed into the historical pavilion area. And from what I see, you don't meet either requirement. But I wanted to hand this over now. It's important." The young man stepped forward, his tone rising slightly. "Sir, please. The line is growing. I need you to step out of the access area. You don't have any ID and you're not in uniform. I can't make exceptions." A few people in the line chuckled quietly. Robert lowered his eyes and slowly turned back. As he walked away, a woman in the line touched her husband's shoulder and whispered, "Poor guy must be lost. Looks like he wandered into the wrong place. Probably just old age. My grandpa used to do that, too." Robert heard it, but he didn't look back. When he reached the bus stop where he'd gotten off earlier, he sat down on the metal bench under the sparse shade of a thin tree. Farther ahead, the base's loudspeaker came to life with an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony honoring our heroes will begin in exactly 20 minutes. Please proceed to the main hangar for the opening address." At the gate, the security guard returned to checking documents. But among the growing crowd near the main hangar, a random radio transmission caught the attention of someone important. Colonel Oliver Lewis, 47, commander of the Restoration and Aeronautical History Division at Kirtland Air Force Base, was standing next to an F-100 fighter jet, posing for photos with invited veterans. He had a steady gaze, impeccable posture, and a perfectly pressed uniform. Beside him, a sergeant was listening to the radio when a voice came through. "One of the gate guards. An old man, someone named Monroe, showed up a while ago, holding an old watch in a worn-out box. Seemed a bit confused. Poor guy." Oliver stopped smiling. "Monroe." Time froze for a second. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened as if he just heard a name from another life. "Did he say Monroe?" Oliver asked the sergeant. "Yes, sir. Something like that." "Why?" The colonel didn't answer. He simply turned sharply and walked toward the base entrance. "I need the full ID of the man who tried to get in earlier." "What name did he give you?" he asked the guards. "Sir, he had a printed invitation. Said his name was Robert Monroe. But don't worry, he looked lost. He was holding some watch in his hands. I don't think he even realized this is a military base." "Which way did he go?" Oliver asked. "He's probably still near the east gate. Hold the opening of the ceremony until I return." Robert was just about to board the bus when he heard someone running behind him. "Mr. Monroe, please wait." Robert turned around. A uniformed officer was running toward him, breathless. "I'm sorry, sir." "Please don't go," Robert furrowed his brow slightly. As the man approached, he stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked onto the wrinkled face of the older man. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Oliver broke the silence, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd meet someone named Robert Monroe. My father used to tell me about a Sergeant Monroe who saved him from an aircraft failure in Da Nang, Vietnam. A failure that would have left him stranded, unable to return to base. As a token of gratitude, he gave him his watch. My father spoke you all his life. That watch in your hands. It must have been my father's. Captain Raymond McClary." Will this watch rewrite a veteran's legacy today? Robert nodded softly, his eyes now locked with the colonel's. It was. He gave it to me the day we returned from our last mission. I was his crew chief. Oliver took a deep breath. A knot formed in his throat. He wiped his face as if trying to keep his emotions in check, then looked down and slowly shook his head. My father spoke of you often. Always said he only made it home because of a stubborn sergeant from Boston who worked miracles with engines. Robert lowered his eyes and smiled, moved. You saved his life. You saved my family's life. By now, a small crowd had begun to gather. Other soldiers, curious civilians, veterans waiting for the ceremony. Someone held a camera. Another started recording with a phone. Mr. Monroe, with your permission, I'd like you to accompany me to hangar 2. The ceremony is about to begin, and you are my guest of honor. When they arrived at the gate, Oliver turned to the guards, his tone now serious. You turned him away. The young guard brought back by a sergeant nodded, clearly ashamed. He didn't have ID, sir. I just thought, you thought a war veteran needed a badge? The guard looked down. Robert glanced at him for a second, then said he was just doing his job. The colonel exhaled deeply, keeping his temper in check. Once inside the base, Robert was escorted by 2 cadets and Colonel Lewis himself. The crowd made way, curious. Murmurs spread across the tents and corridors. Who is he? What's going on? The colonel stepped up to the stage and took the microphone. His voice echoed across the base's sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Children stopped running. Veterans stood up. Silence spread like a blanket across the crowd. Today, as we honor the bravery and sacrifice of our aviation heroes, we made a mistake. Just moments ago. This man beside me was turned away at the gate. This man is Robert Monroe, chief mechanic at Dang Air Base in 1971. He kept jets, pilots, and entire missions alive with his hands. Among those pilots was my father, Captain Raymond McCleary. The watch he carries was a gift from my father given as thanks. My dear father is no longer with us. But thanks to Robert, I had years of memories, lessons, and love from him. That watch is a symbol of everything Robert stands for. Duty, gratitude, and honor. Robert stood still, his face calm, but his eyes welled with tears. With Mr. Monroe's permission, I would like this watch to be displayed permanently as the centerpiece of our historical memorial wing. And more than that, the name of this event will now be changed to Monroe Aviation Honor Day. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Robert stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause, a tribute born of genuine gratitude. Colonel Lewis remained by his side throughout the ceremony, as if repaying a debt that could never be settled. The sun had begun to dip toward the horizon when the ceremony resumed, now transformed. The big screens had been quickly updated. Above the main stage, a navy blue banner now read in golden letters, Monroe Aviation Honor Day. In tribute to the time that was never forgotten, veterans from other wars began to approach him. One by one, they shook his hand with respect. Some knew his name, others didn't. But now, all of them recognized him. Robert simply smiled, nodding gently. Each gesture of gratitude was accepted with the humility of someone who had long made peace with his past. In the background, the now displayed watch ticked quietly under a glass dome. Its softly lit face gleamed like a small jewel within the metallic hanger. At the end of the event, as the lights began to dim and the crowd dispersed, Oliver walked with Robert to the base gate. The young guard, the same one who had turned him away hours earlier, stood waiting, unsure of what to say. As the 2 men approached, the young man straightened his posture. Sir, Robert gently raised a hand to interrupt. You did what you were trained to do. A good soldier follows orders. The guard nodded, visibly moved. Thank you for that, sir, and I'm sorry. Robert touched the young man's shoulder briefly, then continued walking. Outside, the New Mexico sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. The mountains stood in silent witness. Guardians of what is eternal. Robert walked alone to the bus stop. He sat on the same metal bench where he had waited hours earlier, but now something had changed. The bus arrived with its soft diesel rumble. The doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Robert stepped aboard slowly. Holding the rail firmly, he took a seat at the back by the window. Outside, the sun was disappearing behind the desert line. And inside, in silence, Robert closed his eyes for a moment, as if finally he could rest. Because sometimes all a hero needs is to be remembered as the man who never let time stand still. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories so you don't miss the next story, especially for subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where quiet strength is celebrated, and every hero story finds a voice.